First off, let's differentiate between weight loss and fat loss.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So we're going to assume that you're talking about fat loss. If you lose weight, typically, ideally, it comes from fat. If it comes from muscle, then that can absolutely hamper your power output. So the fact that your power is going up and your weight's coming down, I'm going to assume this is all fat loss.
He's
or
just
maybe even
optimizing
unproductive muscle loss.
He's just optimizing his composition, right? Yeah, which is good.
Yep. And then in any case, anytime you can improve that ratio between your strength and the power you're putting out, that's a win, especially if you can do it healthfully. And then second, let's clarify what metabolic efficiency is for those people who maybe have not heard that term or don't know what it means.
For sure.
It's basically turning your fuel combustion into mechanical work. So regardless of whether your fuel comes from carbohydrate or fat or even protein, in some cases, it's how much of that actually makes it to mechanical work and isn't dissipated or lost as heat. And typically, it ranges anywhere from, I've seen 19 to 27%, but most of us fall right around 23%. And most of the calculations that you'll see for kilojoules to kilocalories and vice versa, I think nail it right around 25%.
Yeah. Those other ones are like extreme outliers on the side, like
Yeah.
the 27 and the 19.
Very much so. Yeah. Yeah. So most people are real close to 23.
Just to tell, like, I just want to hammer home this point is that when you're doing work, only 23% of the work that you're doing is making it to the pedals. The rest is heat.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy?
It's
Like
like assuming
70,
you're 23% metabolically efficient.
yeah, 27% of, or sorry, 70.
It'd be 73.
It's a lot.
73% of your,
We hemorrhage energy as heat.
yeah, is
Yeah.
all heat.
Yeah.
If you think about that, that's why we always talk about fans being extremely important
Hugely
inside.
important. I mean, you can,
And outside, making sure that you're optimizing everything to make sure you're cool.
If you were 100%
as
efficient,
possible.
you would win every bike race ever.
It'd be
Right?
amazing.
Because
right?
you'd 4 times your power output.
Yeah, exactly.
You quadruple it.
It'd
Yeah,
be
yeah.
amazing.
So you'd be sailing along at
1,000 watts.
1,000 watt FTP.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah.
Isn't that, it's just crazy, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
burning the
pretty
same
much-
amount of calories.
You're right. It's pretty amazing to think
That's
of.
very
the other
amazing.
thing. Yeah, same caloric output or
Yeah.
intake. Yeah,
Just amazing.
If only.
We are very good.
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
this figure, let's just say it is 23% across the board. It's hard to budge. It's changes in metabolic efficiency are not easy ones to acquire. Some say it's impossible. I don't know if I agree with them. It's frankly a discussion I lose interest in really quickly because there's just no point to it.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to use this opportunity to do a bit of a fat deep dive because I don't think we've really talked about fat before outside of the context of ketogenic diets and fat adaptation and stuff.
We've done some of these, but it's been a while.
Which super
We also
fringe.
we get that question a lot every week. I see them asking us to talk
I
about
can
keto
talk about
diets.
that for a while.
We talked about it a lot.
A lot. I know. And we had like for years.
Yes.
And some people are like, why don't you talk about keto? I'm like, well, we probably have 10 solid episodes about
Yeah.
it.
We beat that topic to death.
Yeah.
So this is us just diving into fat. Apply the knowledge.
Can I just
please.
quickly talk about my DEXA scan? Because it's really like good for me right now.
It's on the same page.
So I just did another DEXA, which is where you get the X-rays to scan like the gold standard for body composition. And I thought I was like gaining a bunch more muscle, so I was like 195, and I looked at my best.
No, I'm just saying, you see that weight on the scale. And you're like, it's got to be muscle.
Yeah.
I know. Well, my strength was going up,
And you were lifting.
Yeah, I was lifting a lot.
Yep.
So my best was last January at like 12% on DEXA, and 12% on DEXA is pretty lean. That's
very lean.
calipers.
It's quite
It's more
lean.
like the 8 or something.
Yeah.
So I had 1 more pound of muscle than back then, but I was 185 in January and I was 195. So the rest, like those 9 pounds, was all fat.
Chub.
Yep. So I gained 9 pounds of fat comparatively. So I pretty much have 9 pounds of fat to be at that same body composition I was before. So now I'm at like 15.6.
Yeah.
And what happened is I did those like 3 to 4 weeks of travel, and during that I just. And you talk about this could be good, but there wasn't a French fry I didn't eat. I drank the whole time, like having hamburgers and 2 dinners, and
I don't know if
and then not exercising, just like sitting in conferences, watching speakers, and like eating French fries. It's not drinking a beer.
I mean, certain things were out of your control, certain were within it, but you partied, you indulged a bit, and maybe you didn't eat 3 weeks of it, but that's how it lined up. It's how it worked out. You rolled with it, and here we are.
Super motivated now to train.
9 pounds of chub.
There we are.
It's already gone down some since the DEXA, but I'm going to try to get DEXAs every month. But anyways,
on top of it, you're conscious of it, and you know how to address it.
The nice part is if you do a DEXA, you know the percentage of. Like, I thought it was muscle, and I think a lot of people, they lift weights, you get a little hungry, you're like, this is all muscle. It's not.
No.
I mean,
It's very not.
No.
Not always.
Yeah. So let's get into some fat talk.
Okay, so let's let's talk fat. The fat is stored in what is called adipose depots. So different places around the body, different forms of storage. There are several of them. They are subcutaneous, which is under the skin.
That's the stuff that we don't like in terms of vanity, right? Because
almost entirely.
It's the squishy.
It's the squishy stuff we don't like.
Then there's visceral, and I'm going to elaborate on these two. So I mean, feel free to interject. But visceral, which is in the organs, or more accurately, it's around the organs. Intramuscular, and then there's also yellow bone marrow, and breast. And we're not really going to cover those two forms of adipose depots. Rather, we're going to talk about the subcutaneous, the visceral, and the intramuscular in depth. The subcutaneous, the interesting thing about that is it's not uniformly spaced. So it's in your hypodermis. So a couple layers of skin down, it's these little pockets of fats underneath your skin. And because it's not uniformly spaced, you automatically think cellulite, right? That's not exactly what it is. Cellulite is actually herniated cells that have left their connection with the connective tissue. They move around. It's not exactly the same thing, but the fact is it's not uniformly spaced, whereas visceral, which we'll get to in a second, is. It's semi-fluid. This form of fat is far less concerning in terms of health risk. Even a person packing a lot of excess adipose or subcutaneous adipose tissue doesn't necessarily mean they're unhealthy. So you can get away with having a fair amount of this on your body without being a direct threat to your overall health.
I've seen this with certain cyclists before, right? Like when I've been in a race and I'm like, hey, that person's not as lean as me and they're blowing
Still
past
very
me on a
fast.
climb, right? Yeah.
I see that fairly often.
Still be healthy. Yeah.
Yep. And this form of fat in particular is an active part of the endocrine system, something I'm going to elaborate on also. Then when we go to visceral, it's semi-fluid, and this is the dangerous stuff. It's referred to as abdominal fat, belly fat, organ fat, and it's basically described as central obesity. And this is the stuff you're worried about. So it's packed in between the organs as opposed to ectopic, which is actually in the organs. It's a different type of fat entirely. So this is between the organs, and if you've ever seen a legit beer belly, where an otherwise thin-looking man has this vast protuberance. I mean, the belly is just, and it looks hard. You'll recognize it if you see it. Very dangerous stuff, because that is the stuff that's tied to a number of obesity-related diseases and all-cause mortality. So it's a big deal.
And in men, it's the hard stomach.
Hard. That's what's so creepy about it. My grandpa, it's creepy. And then the bummer of this is that higher stress is linked to it. So through stress alone, you can increase your level of visceral fat. Just from stress, cortisol and all the things that go along with it.
Wow.
I'm working on it, buddy.
Just slid the champagne glass for all those on the podcast.
But the upside is that both high-intensity interval training and low-intensity work can actually reduce your visceral fat. So it's by far from something that's out of our control. We can actually absolutely address it. And then the third kind that we'll talk about, and this will probably be all we'll say about it, or I'll say about it, is intramuscular. And typically, this is the actual fat stores within the muscle cells themselves. Or maybe it's just outside of the cells, but either way, it's packaged right with them. I'm not entirely sure. In any case, typically it's a bad thing. In sedentary people, it's absolutely a bad thing. But in athletes, it's quite the contrary. It's a good thing. It's on-site storage, just like glycogen is on-site storage. So if you have, as an endurance athlete, intramuscular fat stores, this is a good thing. That's yet another fuel source from which to draw.
It's also a good thing for cows.
I was just going to say,
it makes them tasty.
That's what I want.
So
maybe
ribeye, you look at a ribeye, that's intramuscular
Yep.
fat. Sirloin, when there's no flex, that's not intramuscular fat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this form of fat is, like I said, potentially dangerous unless it's insulin insensitive, insulin sensitive, which in the case of athletes, we tend to be very insulin sensitive. So these IMTGs, intramuscular triglyceride stores, are actually a boon, not a harmful.
So just to say it again, subcutaneous, fat below your skin, visceral, by your organs, that's really like hard, and that's the dangerous stuff. Intramuscular, that's in your muscles, and that's the sirloin versus ribeye.
Yep. And women typically have more of this intramuscular fat stores, and they use more of it. Maybe they use more of it because they have it. I don't know. But
Pretty
either
much,
way,
intramuscular, don't worry about it. I don't even know if there's a way to measure it.
As an endurance athlete, I mean, even if you could measure it, as an endurance athlete, you would take pride in the fact that you have more of it than the rider next to you.
You don't want visceral fat, but if you're an endurance athlete, you're probably working that down. And then for performance, subcutaneous is what we want to get rid of normally, because we don't think a lot of endurance athletes, especially when you have that really small waist, you don't have a lot of visceral fat to get rid of. You're trying to get rid of the subcutaneous fat.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
True. Okay, so those are the depots. Now, there are basically two types of fat, two types of adipose tissue. There's white and brown. So white adipose tissue, WAT, is basically energy storage. That's predominantly what it does. It also serves as cushioning and insulation. So, I mean, there are other purposes to it, but by and large, it's an energy store. Energy in particular being lipids. So anytime we have excess glucose circulating in the bloodstream, body packs it away into fat stores. How that mechanism happens a couple of ways, not really something we need to cover right now. But if you think of free fatty acids floating around in the blood, they're basically esterified onto a glycerol backbone. So esterification is just the process by which the free fatty acids are stuck to this glycerol backbone. And this is where the name comes from. Triglycerides, glycerol, the three fatty acids that are stuck to it. And this takes place inside of the adipocyte, which is just a fat cell. And it's important to understand that there's a constant flux of the free fatty acids in and out of our adipose tissue, and this is largely regulated by insulin. So when insulin's high, we pack it away. When insulin's low, glucagon comes up, and free fatty acids are released into the bloodstream. We can actually use them to power mechanical work and to do a number of other things.
That's why we want to use that sort of stuff when we spike insulin, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's why having high insulin levels, like in the case of metabolic disorder and high blood sugar, which spurs high insulin levels and insulin insensitivity eventually, is a bad thing, because if insulin's constantly in the bloodstream, we can't access fat stores. Insulin simply won't allow it.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
So I guess on the hormone side.
Yeah, so this white adipose tissue is hormonally active, and in particular, leptin and resistant. We're just going to talk about leptin because it's really the only one that's germane to the discussion here. Leptin is produced by these white fat cells, and it acts on the hypothalamus to basically inhibit hunger. Hunger
feels like thunder at times, for sure. Yeah.
So it inhibits hunger. It's the satiety hormone. It's what tells us we're full. And the idea being is to limit fat storage, because the more white adipose tissue we have, the more leptin we have. So if it worked properly, the more leptin we have, the more we get the signal that we're good. We got enough fat stores, brain. We don't need any more. Please tell please tell me I'm not hungry, and everything goes on as normal. We don't accumulate too much adipose tissue. The problem is the more leptin we have in the system, the more likely our brain can become insensitive to leptin, never really getting that signal. And this is why you can see grotesquely or morbidly obese people, even though they have a ton of energy hanging off their bodies, they're hungry all the time. And hunger is a hard thing to combat. So they eat and they get bigger.
This is why we're alive.
Really vicious cycle.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Because it's such a driving force.
Because we're so good at packing away energy for later use. And then this is anecdotal, but always interesting. So when you have somebody who's got like 150, 200 pounds of excess subcutaneous adipose tissue hanging off their bodies, one method of addressing that, I mean, we always talk about you got a proper diet and you got to exercise and do all these things, or you can fast. You can just stop eating. And you think, that can't possibly be healthy. I'll die if I do that. I'll lose all my muscle tissue, et cetera. It's not exactly the way it works. The body's actually really good at preserving life. And the most extreme case, the guy who did the longest fast of all time, is a man by the name of Angus Barbieri. And this took place back in 1965. And I think by then he was like 30 years of age, and he didn't die till like 1990. So he lived like another, 25 years past that. He started at 456 pounds, lost 276 pounds of fat. I'm sure some muscle went with it, but I can't imagine there was a heck of a lot in there. And he basically only cut it off because he reached his goal weight of 180 pounds.
Wow.
So he's like, okay, now I'm good. Because the doctors, this was not planned. He was not planning to go in for an extended fast. I think it was just supposed to be like a week long or a 10-day long fast. And he just kept riding it out. They gave him antioxidants. I'm not sure in what form. Vitamins. I'm sorry, not antioxidants, electrolytes. Vitamins and like a literal multivitamin. Nothing more specific than that.
And water.
And then carbonated water, black coffee, and tea. Dude lost a ton of weight over 382 days.
That's amazing.
That's more than a year.
He was I watched a documentary on this. He was in the hospital the whole time for this.
He was supervised,
but still, 382 days of not eating, and just it went away.
Yeah.
It's just body used it.
Yeah, but think too how long it took, 382 days, right, of not eating.
Whew. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
His FTP probably went down during that time, but
I'm guessing he could do next to nothing. I don't know, though. There's some interesting stuff takes place when you fast.
Probably no high intensity stuff, but he'd probably walk around and all that sort of stuff. It's in that fat burning zone.
I doubt a lot of exercise was taking place.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, the other type of tissue, so adipose tissue. So we have white adipose tissue, and we also have brown adipose tissue, BAT. And these adipocytes, these fat cells, actually generate body heat. Extremely interesting, and I'll explain why I revisited this line of inquiry in a short while here. They're located basically in the neck and in large blood vessels of the trunk, what's called the supraclavicular region. So we're talking about, you think your collarbones and upward. And basically, I don't think it's my theory. I think the reason is they're there to insulate particular blood vessels, the ones that take blood from the heart and get it up to the brain. So, yeah. And so bear with me. It's a mouthful, but they generate heat by uncoupling the respiratory chain of oxidative phosphorylation within our mitochondria.
Oh, of course.
Of course, yeah,
right?
logical.
Makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
And they do this via what's called the UCP1, which is uncoupling protein 1. So all this means is that when we metabolize fuel aerobically within the mitochondria, there's this proton gradient on one of the two membranes. And this basically dissipates that proton gradient. So rather than allowing... I just jumped tracks here. Energy
This is dead air, guys.
Yeah.
No, why he thinks of that, we are getting a 6-person sauna. We got it big enough that we can fit a bike in it, and it has its own TV screen in there that we can hook up stuff to.
Serious? Has a TV?
It has a TV screen because it's got to
Inside the sauna?
Yes, because it's got to
That's
be
cool.
special to be able to take the heat, because you can't put like your iPhone or iPad in a sauna because it will say like too hot.
It'll too hot.
I am
shut
so
down.
pumped. So I think we can put the feedback sports trainer. I don't have the guts to put like an electronic trainer in there.
Yeah.
And we could do training there, but also we could lay in there after we just train. Like,
I prefer that.
yeah. I think I might try a little bit of both.
Okay, I got
anyways,
track.
so
I
we
got
talk
track, I
about
got
heat.
it.
Anyways, go
I'm
back.
picking
Check.
up the thread. Okay, so incoming energy that is typically used to produce ATP, so energy so that we can generate muscular contraction, is instead siphoned off. So this proton gradient is dissipated and it releases heat. And all that does is generate heat. So thermogenesis. We've actually created heat by metabolizing fat without creating ATP for muscular contraction. And you may ask yourself, why is this? What is the purpose of brown? I keep saying that. Brown adipose tissue. And I asked myself the same question. And it basically boils down to the fact that neonates can't shiver. Newborn babies do not have the capacity, the muscular capability to generate that sort of contraction, to shiver. So the only way they can they can't warm themselves. Can't grab a blanket. I mean, they can't do anything other than rely on this fat to protect those very particular blood vessels. So it's basically a defense mechanism against cold.
Interesting.
And it was thought that we basically not evolve out of it, but grow out of it. We don't have a use for it anymore as we age. So it goes away, but it turns out it doesn't really go away. And if it does go away, we can actually bring it back. And we do that through a process called beiging. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's taking white tissue and turning it brown. Okay. Pretty straightforward. And again, this is done with that uncoupling protein. So it interrupts that process, creates body heat instead of creating ATP. And we can induce this via cold exposure. That's basically how you do it. Spend a lot of time outdoors. And I think this is what Dan Carney's book, What Doesn't Kill Us, when he talked about Wim Hof and doing the ice baths and doing the basically naked hikes up Everest. They've become very good at exposure to cold. You can bet there's a whole lot of brown adipose tissue activity taking place.
Interesting.
It's also highly reversible. But what's super cool about it is it takes energy storing fat cells and turns them into energy releasing cells. So our fat is actually metabolizing fat effectively, which is just this is metabolically active fat. It is a thing, because when I got this question, my initial response was to say fat's not metabolically active. Well, maybe not white adipose tissue, but brown adipose tissue absolutely is. And then what kicked all this off is a study just very recently surfaced, just a couple weeks ago, that links caffeine to an increase in this UCP1, this uncoupling protein. Which means it's just another excuse to drink caffeine. But it also says that caffeine may do something to help our white stores become more like brown stores, to become more thermogenic, more metabolically active. And there was also something in there about an upregulation in PGC1 alpha. So now our fat cells within their nuclei are actually kicking out this master switch of mitochondrial biogenesis, telling our muscle cells produce more mitochondria. So it's a win-win.
Interesting. So it probably doesn't
caffeine in that case.
It probably doesn't make you faster on the bike.
No, but it sets the stage for greater work capacity, because if we have more mitochondria, we can metabolize more energy aerobically, which means we can consume more oxygen, which increases our work capacity, plain and simple.
So it's in relatively speaking, it's a very small percentage of the fat that we probably have in our bodies.
I honestly don't know the particular percentage, but it is definitely a small percentage.
So I guess getting back
it's
to
only in a small region of our body too, so it can only be so much, and not a particularly fatty region either.
Right. Yeah. So I guess going back to the crux of things, really fat in most cases isn't metabolically active. However, with brown fat, that does change.
And it does require blood supply. I mean, there is blood going to our fat. So his question regarding relating to blood, I mean, there is blood going there, but metabolic activity, not so much.
Right. Yeah.
In the white tissue.
Yeah. So yeah, you're making yourself more efficient as the bodies you train, and as you, I guess, get rid of tissue that you don't need and increase tissue that you do need for performance. So yeah, he's making himself more efficient, but it's probably, in this case, I assume with Mark, it's probably as simple as the fact that he had power to improve and he's been training, and as a result, that's getting better. And he also had fat to lose.
Yeah.
And as a result, it was dropping.
Improvements in fitness. Wouldn't think any more deeply than that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's just really what it is. And that's honestly common to see. I know for those that are listening to this that have been training for a long time. For those that have been listening to this and training for a long time, I bet you would just kill to be in Mark's shoes, right? To be able to have your power go up and then like lose weight. Because you get to a point where you train enough where you feel like any weight I lose, the power drops too, right? But when you have room to gain on both sides of that equation, pursuing training can satisfy both sides.
Honestly, though, most of us can do it.
It's tough.
Usually they're not at the same time, but most of us, not all of us, have power to gain and we have weight to lose.
Yeah, that's how it goes. So
Or body composition to improve.
Yes.
Not really, that's what you want.
That's what you really want.
Fat loss.
Yeah, exactly right. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and let us know with a thumbs up down below.
If you didn't like us, give us a thumbs down, but let us know what we could do to improve in the comments.
Absolutely. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, you should head over to TrainerRoad.com. It works.
True story.
It's true. Nate used to be slow and now he's fast.
Sort of fast. Not as fast as you.
Still fast, Nate.